Hey, it's Jordan. I'm delighted to have several workers with Frito Lay in Kansas joining me. Obviously, the mainstream media hasn't really covered this much, but there is a pretty major strike going on in Kansas at this Frito Lay factory. And honestly, I've covered a lot of Amazon's inhumane working conditions. Boy, Frito Lay is a whole nother animal, we're finding out. Joining me is Esther Fanning, Rashawn Thompson, Derek Johnson, and Pleasant Desh. Hope I'm pronouncing all that. So let me start with this is a factory that produces Frito Lay potato chips. And was it always the case that workers would be working 12 hours, 7 days a week? Because that's currently, it seems, the pace that you were working before you went on strike 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. Was that always the case, or did that develop recently?
I think it's always been the case, but I'll be honest, I don't think when it was back then, I don't think anyone was trying to speak up. You know, it was just take you take what you're given. You know, um, it became a norm at the company for people to work 12-hour days. 7 days a week. I met a lady last week who said she worked back in the 90s and she didn't have a day off in 11 months. So I don't think no one's ever had the kind of the nerve to speak up and say, okay, we need some kind of change. But I guess maybe it's just this group of young people, the young people that we are right now. We are choosing to say no. We're choosing to spend time with our children, and us speaking up and us wanting those kind of things that are actually just human. It's human for you to one time with the kids. It's right. Human for you time, one time off. It's being deemed as a bad thing in some kind of way. I'm not really understanding where the company is coming from. They do know these things are going on. I mean, they put up a statement yesterday, which is full of lies. But of course, I understand that they have to protect themselves and try and redeem their name back in society or in the community or whatever. But it's become a norm. But it's a toxic norm, in my opinion. If I can find a word for it. It's a toxic norm. I don't think any human being deserves to work that much. I don't think any human being deserves to be away from their loved ones that much. Every human being deserves rights to rest. Every human being deserves time to recover their body mentally and physically. So those are the things you're trying to fight for right now. And, just better pay. The working conditions are not the very best. Um, Not every area that warehouse is AC. I mean, there's fans that blow around. I mean, they just blow hot air. So we've had people, pass out from heat strokes. Um, there's been other situations that have happened, which to be honest, I wasn't a witness to them, but of course, what goes around the plant and the people who've passed away at the plant, and the company will try and cover these situations up. Now, the strike was just brewing. It's been a brewing pot for I would say very many years. Yeah, it's just been we've been. It's like a pot where you add so many things in. You add your meat, you add your tomatoes, you add your onions, whatever vegetables you want to add in. This is how this has come to a big boil, and we are standing and saying enough is enough.
And it's bound to boil over. At some point, this was going to happen.
So
it has been a very downward spiral and decline over the course of years, to the point where when we used to come in and enjoy our work, our jobs, we love what we do, you can only continue to work people like this for so long and so much. I believe that it just got to the point where everyone is tired, everyone is exhausted from being overworked all the time across the board, and the pandemic didn't make it any better. But I cannot say that that's the only key factor to this, because it has been declining over the course of years. So this is not something that happened overnight, but I feel like we've all had enough.
I know a retiree recently retired back in November. Him and I were talking, and he said, "Well, we had this issue the 35 years I worked here. That we, excessive forced overtime, 84 hours a week, and we didn't get days off. But this didn't change in the 35 years I was here. I'll make sure things can change in the 35 years you might be here." And I think that starting with this strike is the first step to getting it to where Frito Lay understands we're not robots, we're people. We have families, and just like you touched on, every person deserves a livable wage too, a wage that you don't live under the poverty line, where you can maintain consistency in your family, whether it's time, whether it's the environment they live in. And Frito Lay really just doesn't see that.
See, and the fact is that it's been going on for so long that people kind of got used to it, to the fact of like we're all moving monotone to our own feelings when it came to the truth that we were in. Because when I first got the job, I felt like I was appreciated. It was something new, the pay, it felt like a good wage at the time. I found myself in the warehouse, and the longest I had worked straight was 8 months off. The only way that you could take a day off was to use a point. And, their process to their points, it hurts a lot of people when you're in a standing where you need to work 8 months straight and you're supposed to uphold a good credential of points when maybe you have a family, when maybe there's an emergency. There's just so much stuff that do not care about when it comes to us. And, so that appreciation that I thought that I was feeling when I came to this company slowly dwindled and disappeared. I had to move into 2 different departments just to try to see if I could find an area where I could reduce the amount of time that I worked. And if I wanted to work, I had access to be able to do that through that position. So, yeah, it's just been pretty tough. When I was in that mode to work that long, I turned into a robot myself. That's what I feel like. So I didn't really realize how much I was missing out on. I got used to friends and family saying, "Man, you always work, Rashawn. Like, when are we going to spend some time?" Like,
and then people stop inviting you to things.
Yeah,
they just assume, you get friendships. You're just working.
So then when I got that time to get out there and spend time, it's just like, wow, I feel like I've been missing out on life.
And it's hard to shut it off too. You almost feel like you should be at work when you really should feel like I deserve to have a life. I deserve to go enjoy dinner with my girlfriend.
Yeah.
Can I ask, just so my audience understands? So, I don't know. Technically, you're supposed to be working, 5 days a week, 40 hours a week. We know that doesn't happen. But can you describe this point system? Because it seems to me, instead of giving you the legally required days off, they are making you reach a certain amount of working hours to get points to then take days off. Is that how it's working?
Pleasant, you want to touch on that?
Okay, so the point system, after you're done with your probationary period in your department, you gain a point every month. And you can only go up to a +3 in your points. And the way that it works is if you need to call in, it costs you a point to take a day off of work. If you're at a +2, you can take 2 days off of work with it being charged 1 point. With a doctor's note, if something were to happen and you had to go to the doctor, you can do a max of 5 days off with a doctor's note.
Which you would get paid for, or?
That depends on if you have sick time.
Yep. And you have to use a point in order to use your sick time.
Yes.
So if you're negative, let's say you're -2, and you get sick, which no one plans to get sick, whether you have sick time or not, you have to then take a point. So then, your sick time can almost become held hostage because when I'm sick, I can't afford to take a point. I have to come into the plan.
And if you're not at a +2 on your point, then every day that you have to call in for burns a point.
Yeah.
And once you get down into the negatives in your points,
it's -3.
3.
You become on a habitual, which means they would basically essentially write you up and say, hey, you're at a -3, so it's a attendance write-up. And then you have to go from that point 90 days without calling in. You cannot miss a single day in those next 90 days to then gain a point back.
And kind of put you on a freeze.
Yeah, basically a
where
freeze.
you cannot miss work, and it could lead to termination.
And every time you take a point, that calendar date starts over. So it's like if you were to take a point on the 3rd, and then you get all the way to the 28th, and you get sick, and you have to call in again. Okay, well now it's 30 days from the 28th, not from the 3rd, but that calendar starts back over. So now you're at a -2 if you've called in on the 3rd and the 28th in the same month, and then you're starting that calendar back over. You're also charged points for if you decline overtime, it's a half. So if you're, if you're about to get a point back on the 28th, let's say, and you decline overtime on the morning, being a third shifter of the 26th, let's say I couldn't stay over at a doctor's appointment, then I take that half. Okay, well now my, 30 days starts back over again, and I was 2 days away from getting a point back. So they make it as hard as possible for you to make sure you have points to take days off work.
So, besides this being inhumane, it doesn't really sound legal to me. Have you guys consulted lawyers? Because, I mean, of course, Amazon, other companies don't really offer paid sick leave. But this notion that if you don't do overtime, you'd lose points, or you need to accumulate X amount of points to get a day off, I mean, it seems very legally blurry to me.
The other aspect is, in order to use your sick time, you don't get paid for the first day that you are sick. You get paid for the days after that. So if I called in for just one day, I can't use my sick time for that, and I don't get paid for it. I have to call in for 2 or more days in order to be able to utilize any of my sick time.
And that's what kind of makes the sick time feel like it's held hostage because, it's almost like what's the point in having sick time if I can't get sick and use it? Like if I'm sick for 3 days and I've got, I've been there long enough and accumulated a week of sick time, then I should be able to use those 2, 3, 4 days, whatever it might be, get paid for them all to make sure, okay, I'm still having my paycheck, at least to the minimum 40, which we all work more than that. As far as legality, I would say we're in Kansas, so it's a right to work state. And I think that might be a question better suited for someone on the committee or even a legal team. It's probably not an answer we would have off the top of my head.
And
I will
you
say
don't
this.
start out with vacation or sick time.
No, you don't.
You have to work for a year before you get either one.
I mean, I'll say this, I see where the suppression comes in when it comes to people trying to consult any lawyers and stuff when it comes to this kind of things.
You're weeded out very fast.
Yeah.
For one reason or another.
Oh, no,
Well, they're
yeah.
pretty smart with how they do things.
Yeah.
Because it's just like the point system. Sorry to interrupt you. The point system, how it is when you talk to the public and you talk about other jobs that have a point system, they'll say, well, Frito Lay offers a really good plan. They have one of the best point plans that we have in Kansas. Or I don't know outside of Kansas, but that's just what I've heard down here. But when it comes to it, what other place works you the way they do?
Right.
The thing about it is, I think we had our first lawsuit that I've publicly known about. That was last year during the pandemic. This is, I think it took a lot of courage for those young men to stand up and say, hey, we feel this way and that way. It was settled out of court. We didn't really have any details of the situation because the guys had quit the job. They had resigned from their positions and that they were comfortable enough to fight while they were from the outside. So big corporations will make you, there's a way of intimidating you when it comes to you fighting for your rights. And I've been in situations where you want to speak up and it could be like all of us, on the same page, yeah, we don't feel this is right. And when it comes to now speaking up and calling that out, I could be the only one standing up because people get scared. They don't want to be, they don't have a target on their back. They don't want to lose their jobs. Someone, oh man, my kids need me, insurance. So there's this intimidation thing that goes around. It's an unspoken kind of
Atmosphere.
atmosphere when it comes to us speaking up about what's been going on.
And it's because a lot of that management, they rule with an iron fist. They're very hard-hearted, might be the right way to word that. It's very strict. It's very
and I would say, especially with when it comes to there's parts of the plant that are not as strict, but I'll say the warehouse, which in my opinion has majority of the problems that we're really trying to fight for. There's a lot of intimidation that happens in the warehouse. There's a lot of discrimination, just things that the members of the people who work in the warehouse, they don't want to talk about them, because if they'll come to you and whine and cry, and I mean you'll hear them out, but you ask them, hey, do you want to speak up? Everyone's scared because they know if they try and say something, there's going to be some kind of retaliation. So I think
there'll be a repercussion.
So I think this is why for so many years we've been taking this. People before us have taken this, and I don't for us to stand up. I'm actually really proud of this group of union members. We've risen up to the occasion, and enough is enough. On our end, enough is enough. I mean, the company might sit there and try and make the public make us look like we're the victims or we're bad, but I don't think over 300 people or over 500 people would be insane to feel this type of way. So we are hoping that from this strike we can get a couple of things, some change, and as we move on, we want to implement so many other things that many more changes. So we'll see how it goes. But as far as legal trying to get legal counsel, I'll be honest, there's been a fear because we always felt like we lose. And I'll be honest, some lawyers will tell you, no, this is a big corporation.
Right, we don't want to take that case.
We don't want to take that case. You might not win. It might not be looking really good for you because, I mean, of course, it's a big corporation. They hire the best of the best when it comes to their legal teams and their advisors. So that's what we face.
There's a noise behind you that is picking up. I don't know if you hear it.
Oh, that's awesome. But yeah, it's definitely been a long time coming. I would say the strike, people standing up, finally having one voice as a big group. So, like she said, I'm really proud of everyone that's come out and made a stand.
Yes.
And made their
Can you kind of talk about? I mean, it sounds like most workers have been working like 70 to 80 hours a week. What is the general kind of like average hourly rate that you've been paid?
That is going to vary by department. Different departments have different base wages, with our PMOs and our maintenance guys making probably the highest salary there. I'm not sure what their cap off is for their hourly wages.
Well, I think the PMO wage is maybe $24.50, and I know your maintenance wages depend on if you're a CV or a level mechanic.
Could be about $25 to $32.
Yeah, somewhere in there. Lowest wage entering, I believe, as a Frito Lay temp is 16 and some change. So I mean, there's a lot of a gap there between departmental wages.
Yes, sanitation and box drop and some of the floater packers make about 20 an hour.
Yeah.
20 something an hour. So it's really going to depend on what department you work. I know that the warehouse used to make more, and
They used to be 20, and they took it down.
They took it down to 15.
Yes.
And then they gave them an increase because they couldn't keep anyone in the warehouse, so they increased the pay from $15.54 to $18 something. And to be honest, that's where we have the most problems is the warehouse. The working conditions are not the very best. The pay is not the best.
And people very quickly want to get out once they're able, whether they're out of probationary period or whatever it might be. They're like, I'm going to go to a different department, whether it be on the production side of the plant. And then they try and, like he said, get to a department where, you can move and be like, wow, I'm in as just much of an overtime position in the warehouse as I am sanitation. And so, you keep trying to bounce around. Some people actually, they do that because Frito Lay will not force you when you're in training for a department. So people will intentionally bid somewhere to guarantee their weekends during their, 4 or 5 week training period, whatever. And then once they're out of training, they'll try and bid somewhere else again because they know, okay, well, here comes the overtime again. The only way for me to get weekends, get time off, and even then they can't force you in early or over while you're in training to guarantee you're just working your 40 hours and you're seeing your family. They'll bid to another department real quick, and then they'll train through there. And in some ways that it shouldn't be that way, but then once you're qualified in that department, they can move you around in any department as they please. So you don't have what's called a home department. So if you're trained in the warehouse, sanitation, and box drop, and a packer, then every night when you come in, you don't know what department you're going to be in. You don't know which side of the plant you're going to be in. You don't know how to dress appropriately, whether you have to follow, the conditions of being in the cold in the warehouse, or whether you're going to be in the, heater side of the kitchen.
Essentially, the more areas you're trained in, the more areas you can be forced into. In early, staying over late, the more qualifications you have, the more at risk you essentially become for the forced overtime.
And what they might do is, let's say your home department is sanitation, because that's where you're at currently. They might force you in on your weekend, but then make you go box shop, which they're not supposed to do that. They force you in just to force you for what is your, at the time, home department. So then once you get qualified in a bunch of different areas, well, then you're susceptible. Maybe they don't need me in my home department for sanitation on the weekend, but they're going to force me into box shop on my weekend. So I'm still not getting my days off because they're breaching the contract, but they have this little thing they like to say, company needs. So if we need you, you got to be here regardless. Like, we don't care about your family, what your days off are, what your own department is. Company needs. We're going to need you to come in. And then if you decline that, there's your point right there.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's something that we're also trying to fight. There's a phrase that company needs is a phrase that has been really, to be honest, destroying our morale as workers in there. Now, with company needs, a lot of things play in. They'll use you in places because they need to, not because sometimes you're qualified in them. It's just company needs. And I think the overtime is also coming. We have people who, because they want to get their weekends off, they would rather do FMLA, family medical leave of absence, or whatever you call it. And so when they FMLA, because they know they've not been getting days off, they FMLA because it's one of the guaranteed ways to get days off. And I can never sit and judge anyone who gets FMLA because we have so many people who have so many mental health issues in there.
Yes.
I just saw one of the guys that I worked with just told me how, he put it up on Facebook and said there was a guy who committed suicide in there because of how much he was working. And of course, we don't have the name of the person or where he came from or the family, or it was a he or she, but this is the information that's out there.
There's been two. Yeah, there's been two.
So the work environment is when you work 12-hour days and then you do that suicide, maybe you work 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and then someone calls in because, they call in because, they had to call in. You might, before you leave, sometimes they might force you to come back in at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's a suicide. You only had 8 hours in between when you clock out and when you come back in. And they require you to be in there. So how do you function as a human being like that? How do you function mentally? How do you take time to recover? How do you take time to spend time with a loved one? How do you take time to put yourself together? How do you take time to feed your body? It makes no sense.
And feed your body right. And not just fast food, not just like I have to grab something. You're having time to actually sit down and make a meal. And like, how are you having time to maybe get your 5-year-old up in the morning and see her for a couple of hours, go to the park, because you just have that small 8-hour window that you got to basically shower, shave, eat, get to bed, and get right back up and come in.
And I want to point out, Frito Lay North America profited $5.34 billion last year.
Yep.
That was their profits. So seems to me they got enough money maybe to hire additional workers for weekend work, seasonal work, to give their current workers, at least one day off. It should be 2 days off. So I don't know. It's kind of obvious they're making plenty of profit.
Let me take this one. I will tell you this. So during the pandemic, we were open. We were actually one of the, what was it called? A cluster site for COVID. So
we ran at 60% staffing capacity.
Yeah, we were running. It was running 24 hours a day,
and it was record numbers. They said
that we made. I think we made, the company made some good money off our sweat, tears, blood, diseases, and all that.
And they told us
while you risked your life, by the way.
While we were risking our lives and the lives of our loved ones, because when we go back home, we're going back home to loved ones. I see my little one over there. Now, when they decided to bring in temps, in my honest opinion, Frito Lay has exhausted all their temp agencies here in Topeka, so they went out of town,
out of state,
Tennessee,
to bring
South
in
Carolina.
forklift drivers. Some of them say they're from Mississippi, Florida,
South
Texas,
Carolina.
South Carolina, New Orleans, and they brought them in. The first 2 weeks of them coming in, there was a major accident that happened at the plant, which opened doors for the FDA to come in. That accident did not happen to a Frito Lay employee. It happened to a temp employee who was flown in to come in to work. I tell everyone in my number of years that I've been at Frito Lay, I have never seen or heard of an accident of that capacity. So I don't know what kind of training this young men and women were getting. But clearly, even them having these temps come in to try and cover these days and cover this time is not working. No one in Topeka wants to work at Frito Lay anymore. They have tarnished their name. They do not have a good name. When it comes to management, when it comes to time, it is just a bad name overall. Those of us who have stayed, we stay because we develop friendships. We develop it becomes a big family. And we look out for each other. And we know we're in there because some of us are single moms, some of us are single dads. It's been a source of income, but it's also become like
a lot of sacrifice
and a toxic environment.
Because
you find people who come in there, and I tell you what, I say this all the time. Don't just think it's a human being clocking in.
Right.
Sometimes you have depression clocking in, you have anxiety clocking in, panic attacks clocking in, and people might not share the experiences, but if you take time and sit down with someone, they will let you know. I talked to another guy yesterday, I don't want to say his name. He said because of this job, him and his wife had to separate for months. So marriages are on the line, relationships are in the line. I had my own little situation last night. The father of my children was going on for me because he told me to basically divorce Frito Lay. But when I do that, I'm basically divorcing my benefits. Those things that make sense to me and my loved ones and my kids.
Being a single father, I have custody of my daughter. And something that the court has told me is, well, we want to see you have at least one day off a week. And that's something that I can't guarantee to my daughter, to the court, to the mother of my child. And it's strenuous. It gives me anxiety.
It is not a good career path for those with very small children because you are not going to be able to put your time in with your children at home. My kids are older, so it works a little better for me, but kids get sick. You have to call in sometimes and take care of your family and your kids. And that's hard to do, especially in a one-parent household, things of that nature.
If you're a dedicated person, this is definitely not a job that you want to come to because the dedicated people are us. We're the ones that still run the place. We're the ones that are there holding that place down. And it's my dedication that has me there, and that's why I said finally when I got that moment of air and peace of silence, no machines in my ears, and I got, some days off, I got to see exactly what I was missing, and I mean, lately, since I made that transfer from the warehouse to processing, like they said, there's a big difference. You're treated like a kid in the warehouse. You really are. But in the processing side, that's when I learned about my voice. And that's when I learned that we could voice our opinions. And we could say, things to them if we had any questions. But in the warehouse, there was none of that.
And I know, touching on the FMLA thing, if you go out and get FMLA, for whatever the reason might be, they take your vacation.
Yeah.
So, explain FMLA. What's that?
So FMLA is Family Medical Leave of Absence.
Okay.
You can apply for it. And I believe that they just give you paperwork, you take it to your doctor or your therapist or psychologist, whoever it is. They fill it out, do a session with you, whatever. And then you send it back to Frito Lay, and they may or may not approve it. And if it is, it's approved for X amount of days. And then once it's approved, Frito Lay yanks your vacation from you because they treat it as the same. But then you're getting paid for those vacation days. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, you don't get paid for FMLA days.
No, you don't.
You don't. So then you don't even get paid for the time off that you're taking, with your family, with your kids, whether it be your own personal mental health issues, whether it be you have a girlfriend or a spouse that has a health issue. Now you're not even getting paid for those days, versus where you have vacation, you're at least getting paid for them, but you have to schedule those vacation days 48 hours in advance. Or like Pleasant touched on, those sick days, you got to have a point just to take it. So people find, well, the only way to guarantee me getting time out of Frito is FMLA. And some people can look at that and be frowned upon, because there are people that's the only way they can do it.
They've had to abuse FMLA because it's the only guaranteed way to get a weekend off.
Even a single day.
Yeah, I even touched on the managers. I tell you what, they worked a couple of hours in the day and they're gone. They're never there in the week during the weekends.
That was my next question, because I doubt the executives and HR are working 7 days a week.
No,
they get their weekends every week.
Yes.
And sometimes, even during the week when you're trying to make a phone call to HR, maybe you have a question or something, you can barely get through. They're never there. They're never in the office.
They leave early.
Still
get paid the same.
And they don't have to be held accountable they don't have to be in the office at 7.
A lot of upper management, when the pandemic hit, they got to work from home
For their safety.
Right.
for their safety.
But it was us who they told us, well, you're essential. Well, you guys kept this company running. You guys are the ones that really made us get these record sales. But then when we're in a contract negotiation like this, the raise is a crumb. It's so little. While you've got, salaried employees, getting their days off. They're getting their bonuses. And we're here struggling to be above the poverty line to make it work with our families, whether it be emotional and it's time off and seeing them, or whether it's financially and being able to hold down a steady apartment or house. And like you said, that's how marriages are ripped apart. You don't want the interaction to be, you're walking in the door as your spouse is walking out, and it's, hey, honey, and that's it. Or you don't want it to be, you're living a relationship through FaceTime phone calls while you guys are on breaks. You can't expect someone to say, this is the type of relationship I want to be in for the next 35 years while we process through a work career.
I mean, personally, I love my wife, but if I travel for a story for 2 weeks, there could be some friction.
Yeah.
Me being away that long. So I could only imagine basically having a few hours a day, if that, with your loved ones. It could destroy your life.
It can. And the working conditions, I think if we were in better working conditions, some of it would be kind of okay.
Right.
Extreme heat and extreme cold temperatures are not very suitable for your body. So by the time you go home, you're trying to sleep to recover. And by the time you get up, you just have enough time to shower, probably eat, and hit the road. This past winter when we had the storm,
With the ice storm.
we had the ice storm. I think one of the services, I think not gas, had to really put their foot down when it came to Frito Lay because they had because everyone was and every other company was shutting their gas down.
They asked us not to run on certain nights to preserve gas for the community, and they said no, we're gonna run.
And there was, I mean, I don't know what really happened, but we were in there working day and night. I was in there a couple of those nights, and one of the extreme nights I had to stay home because I had a pet and I also had my children. So the bosses who were getting bonuses for that or getting, a big, hey, good job for keeping the place running, they were not there. They were not adding whatever they were adding into the heating lamps. What was it?
The portable heaters, those kerosene heaters.
They were not adding kerosene in those heaters. I didn't see any of them doing it, but I saw maintenance guys doing it. I didn't see them getting, any kind of recognition for that, for keeping us kind of warm.
And something that'll happen is they'll put these kerosene heaters out, but they're pointed towards carts and carts and carts of cardboard, causing a fire hazard for us. But they're like, well, this is the only way we can warm the warehouse for you guys. This is the only way we're willing to, because it's cheaper for us to have small, maybe 4 portable kerosene heaters over the entire warehouse, thinking this will do it. In reality, you're causing a problem, being a potential fire hazard for all the employees that are not just on the warehouse, then in that building.
And honestly, they didn't really care, honestly, because then when it comes to summer, if you're on a processing side, their fans, they had so many air conditioning units this year, but they were all pointed at machines to keep them cool because of how hot that they got. It's not about us in there. It's just about money.
The machines running those numbers per hour.
The machines run 24 hours a day unless there's a shutdown in a certain department. So they brought out air conditioning systems just for the machines in order for them to run efficiently 24 hours a day. So how many days a week? And someone look from the outside looking in can say, oh my God, these guys are so inconsiderate. They probably just want a luxury. Nothing good comes easy. We do really work hard for every dime that we make in there. But I believe that they can do a better job at when it comes to how much they pay us. They can do a better job with management. And they can do a better job. Our working conditions can be way better than what they've been.
And sanitation can attest to this because I used to be an operator, and she was in sanitation. Our lines they shut down briefly, and when they do a shutdown, management is telling sanitation we want those lines down, clean, and back up in the blink of an eye.
Sometimes they don't even give us enough time for the operators to shut the line down and us to clean them. I'll come in at 11 to clean a line that's supposed to have already been down and ready to go, and we won't even have access to it because they just shut it down at 11. So then we're looking at conditions of being put 2 hours, 3 hours behind on our job in processing because they're still trying to do their job of shutting the lines down. And none of that matters.
And that'll happen because it's all about the money. So if they're like, well, we didn't run enough pounds of a certain product, they're like, the scheduled shutdown was at 9 p.m. They push it back to 11. So then we're just now we're starting our shutdown process at 11. That shutdown process can take 2 or 3 hours. Well, now sanitation's expected to come in. Hey, well, we need this line clean and ready to run by 7 a.m. when first shift comes back in.
And then the attitude is, we don't care how you have to do it to get it done. Yep. We don't care that it's 2 or 3 hours behind. You will stay over and finish it or skip your break.
Yeah, they will expect you to work through your lunch, skip your breaks. I know me being an operator, there were many times where I did not get a lunch. And they're like, just fill out a Chronos edit sheet, which is our time clock system. They say, just fill it out and we'll pay you. Well, it's not about getting paid for those 30 minutes of the lunch. It's about, can I sit down? Can I eat? Can I get hydrated in the break room?
Now,
just take a second to breathe.
With that being said, in sanitation, sometimes some of our areas are 130, 140 degrees.
Yep.
The higher up you go, the hotter it is. You cannot work your people like that in that kind of heat. They're going to fall out. They're going to throw up. I've seen guys throw up, get sick take a
Pass
few
out.
minutes,
Pass out. Yeah.
pass out, and get back to it because they don't have a point to take to go home, or they know that if they leave, then it is messing the rest of the crew up and we'll have to pick up the slack or finish their job.
And the wild thing about Frito Lay is their standards for sanitation, because that's also one of the positions that I hold. Their standards for us are this high, but the way that they look at us is this low. They look like we're beneath them. And
Sanitation
that
is
feeling
low
is-
on the totem.
Oh yeah, like we can sit here and clean these machines that's been running for a week. We have 8 hours. We might have an 8-hour window if
Right.
they have their shutdown on time.
Right.
But and then they can run for 2 weeks, and we still clean that, and they still want the same performance on that machine that you put in, that you cleaned, 2 weeks ago or a week ago. You still have that same amount of time, and they want the same amount of work out of you. Because
Now, while we're touching on that subject, I'm one of sanitation's third shift trainers, and I'm also the relief lead. And our working conditions, they're terrible. We work in extreme temperatures, with or without a suit. We handle chemicals. We
Very abrasive chemicals.
Yeah.
Yes,
strong.
acid. We have several chemicals that we handle on a normal basis, but we're not considered skilled workers, nor are we paid as skilled workers at that rate and wage.
Because cleaning those lines is not just spraying water on them and letting them dry. And as a prior operator, shutting those lines down isn't just hitting a button and walking away. There's 20, 25 steps that you have to go through. And some things you have to do one before you can do the other. And you have to wait for maybe whether it's the fryer to cool down to drain it, or you have to wait for a product to finish running through the line and get over the wall before you can shut the tumbler off. Things like that just takes time before we can finish our shutdown, enabling our sanitation crew to come make sure that they're cleaning these lines and making sure that the product we are getting out to the public is meeting those FDA regulations, is clean, is tastes good. It's a tandem. They work in hand, but they expect both departments, hey, get that shutdown done. Hey, get that cleanup done. Hey, let's get that line right back up and running.
And let me ask, this is not just about destroying lives. People have killed themselves. Workers have killed themselves.
Yes,
Workers have killed themselves at this warehouse. So can you share any details you know about, do we know how many, what the circumstances were?
As far as I know two personally. One was actually a lead, and one was just a worker that I actually became friends with, like on the sonship side. That's about how far I can take that. But from my knowledge, from speaking to them, it was affecting their relationships, which, hey, you're missing time at home, and then once you're at home, now your time being home isn't that important to them anymore. And that's basically both stories that I got from out of it, so, I mean, you run into a lot of things that you didn't think were going to happen in your life, in your relationship, because now it's destroyed over you trying to keep your family afloat.
And that's got to be tough, because if you're going to work and you want to provide for your family, and the job you're in all aspects is making you feel inadequate, then when you're coming back in the door of your home where you're like, the reason I do this is provide the insurance, help provide for my kids or my spouse. Well, then if you feel inadequate in your relationship, it's a losing battle, and it's a very quick downslope. And like Esther touched on, sometimes it's clogged in with depression, anxiety, panic attacks, maybe even self-loathing. You just feel lost. You're almost in this limbo because you're just almost told, well, you're now a robot, and this is what we expect out of you. So when you have that inadequacy feeling on both ends, you don't know, almost where's your support team? Is it at home, in the home I live in, or is it at work? Where do I go to find the relevancy? And it shouldn't have to be that struggle.
I feel like it causes and creates a lot of mental health issues that maybe aren't spoken about. Anxiety, maybe even PTSD, definitely depression. You take harsh working conditions with a toxic environment, and you're breeding a battleground for your employees to have depression, for overall morale to just
feeding off that morale
so
of each other.
low, yes. And when you're working your employees to the point of exhaustion, they have no fight left in them.
See, and I'll say I'm actually one of those individuals. I actually have a therapist. They're part of the reason why, suffering from anxiety and depression. It's just a confusing atmosphere. They're verbally telling you that we appreciate you, we admire your work, we want you here, but they're showing you that they could care less about you and your safety and how you're doing. It's more shows how's that machine doing.
What's that bottom dollar look like?
Yeah.
Are we hitting numbers?
It's all Frito Lay is about numbers. Every single day, any department you go into, it's about numbers. How much they can ship out the door, how much they can just squeeze out of you.
And from what we're hearing, they're finding out while we're on strike, they can't get the numbers out like they were, thinking they were going to bring in this temp agency. And when you talked about that accident, it was all just freak thing. My girlfriend works in the ER here speaking from the hospital. And I worked third, and I was sleeping during the day. And I woke up to a text message saying, hey, we had a trauma that came in from Frito, forklift driver. She's probably going to lose part of her leg. And because of that, because of the not adequate training, they're bringing in a temp agency of people who either have no prior training or they're just not taking the job serious because they don't have the same repercussions Frito Lay employees are. Mm-hmm. They're not held to that same standard. This girl lost from the kneecap down of her leg. In her 20s. She'll never be the same as she was. Not saying she won't live a normal life, but life won't be what it was. Mm-hmm. And that's because they were trying to help solve the problem of these 7 days a week, 12-hour days by bringing in these temps that were still working 12-hour days. So it was almost like putting an infected Band-Aid on them.
Now, I will say, I'm not going to mention names. We wanted to remain anonymous, but, in 2016, one of our guys in the warehouse had been forced for 7 days a week, 12s for 4 or 5 months with no day off. And he actually did not live here and lived in Lawrence. And he fell asleep at the wheel on his drive home. Well, he totaled his car and ended up in the hospital with a broken arm. But he could have died. And he fell asleep from exhaustion from working. And we're talking about a gentleman in his 30s, early 30s. So I can only imagine the strain that it would put on one of the higher seniors working that capacity to a gentleman in his 60s.
I know myself this year, I went 83 days off, 83 days straight without a day off. And they were 12s. And it's hard to be a single father and raise a young girl like I have. Not everyone has a great support system and as flexibility as others do. So with that point system, if you don't have the sitter, FMLA is your only route to go ahead and get it. Or, if you don't have the points to call out, you're basically gambling with your job that, you can be able to hold on.
Well, I also think, for children, I even know with my nephew, even if you have your parents, at home, my nephew was lucky enough to have them during a pandemic. It's unsettling for kids. They were at home, couldn't see their friends. Schooling was disrupted. So if you're then seeing your parents very little, that could be permanently, traumatic for them.
Yeah.
And I know personally me, I don't want to be that father where there's not a lot of photos of me and my daughter together. And I don't want her to be like, well, I didn't see my dad growing up a whole lot because he had to work all the time. And that's the position Frito puts us in because they say, well, we're just going to force you. You're just going to have to be here. And you're just going to have to make everything else work outside of it. But thanks for making us number one. When in reality, it should be, look, we come in, we do our job for you guys, we work hard. But we have families, we have lives, we have mental health issues. There are things in this world bigger than money.
And we put in so much time in there that sometimes when you even have a day off, you don't even know what to do with yourself because you're so accustomed to being at work and hearing machines going off and beeping.
kind of in
lost
that
some-
motion.
You lost some of your friends.
We've lost friends, and
Or you spend it sleeping.
a lot of
You're
us.
wasting your own
Like
day
it's
because you're
like a
trying to catch up.
recovery.
Yeah.
It's like a
Yeah.
recovery. And of course, they put a statement out yesterday, or whenever that day was, just to kind of cover their bases, which is, it was kind of cute of them, but to be honest,
There was no
There was
factual.
no fact, and that's the
Behind
favorite
that.
word to say is what they're saying is factual. Now, when was it factual? Like for a week? Were you calculating that by a week? Because their numbers were all off.
numbers
over the
were-
amount of
yeah.
time.
Right. Or are you strictly pulling from maybe one department? you know?
probably.
So-
And these numbers that we're talking about were as far as the amount of people that were being forced, for long periods of time. And they made these numbers sound so small, but that just wasn't the case.
Is that because of when dealing with being forced, a lot of people would rather sign to come in early than be forced
to stay,
over.
yeah.
So they have volunteered for overtime. So is that not taken into account or consideration because it's now volunteered time, not
You're
forced
kind
overtime?
of picking your poison because
Yeah.
if me being in the warehouse, you being in the warehouse, you almost can guarantee someone's gonna get forced over.
Mhm.
You're gonna get forced over, or you're gonna get forced in early the next day. So then you're looking at yourself. Would I rather work a 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. or would I rather work an 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. because I'm a third shifter in the warehouse. So you got to pick what 12 do you want? How do you want it? And it shouldn't be that way. It should be, I know I'm going to work my 8 hours and go home. And none of us are able to look at a girlfriend, boyfriend, spouse, whatever, and say, look, I'm going to get my weekend off. Babe, we're going to go to Kansas City with the kids. We're going to go to Kansas City Zoo. We're going to check out the aquarium. Or just a simple, hey, let me take you out to dinner night and go catch a movie. We can get a sitter and let's us spend some time together and really enjoy each other's company. We can't do that because we don't know. And then on top of that, even if you're given the weekend off, they'll still call you. They will call you in the middle of the night at 3, 4 in the morning. A career corner like, hey, I know that you have Saturday, Sunday off. We really need you. If you want to come in, give us a call. And with Frito, if they call you and just by chance you grab your phone and you answer, you don't even look at it, you have to come in. It's not an option.
Or you burn a point.
Exactly. Or you burn a point. It literally is, we are forcing you in. So I know in my phone, I have all of our crewing coordinators say, as Frito Lay, do not answer. Because it's just a constant reminder to me, do not answer that phone or you will be going to work. And if it's that first day off you've had in 83 days, then you finally got it. And then you wake up at 3 in the morning, almost anytime you get a phone call at 3 in the morning, it's not good news. And you roll over out of sleep and grab it. Hey, this is so-and-so at Frito Lay. We're going to need you to come in. You're like,
But you do it naturally because of the time and because if somebody's calling you that late, then it has to be something serious.
Right.
And it's just them taking advantage.
right. So before you're even awake looking at who the screen is, you're like, hello. Well, now you've got yourself into a situation or predicament that you shouldn't even have to be in. They should say, this is your weekend. Go ahead. Go ahead. These are your days off. You guys go ahead. We'll see you back on your Monday. And then we'll do our normal 5 days, 8-hour days. But it's not like that. And the perception, reputation in Topeka and surrounding areas at Frito, knowing about the forced overtime, that's why people don't want to go there. They don't want to walk into that monster and be
It
like,
used to be 20 years ago, 30 years ago, they still had the overtime issues, but it was more of a reputable company to work for. They had the competitive wages. They were in competition with the other industries out here in Topeka. The atmosphere was not as toxic. The working conditions were not as harsh. I do not believe that we were as short-staffed, but they will run us a skeleton crew and they will not care. It's not, we're gonna get more bodies in here because there's no more bodies to pull. And everybody in Topeka knows somebody that works for Frito Lay or knows that they should probably go to one of the other corporations
and I know
versus coming to Frito Lay.
I know before that we got out on strike, this was about a week before, I was talking to a crewing coordinator in our crewing office, and they said, not including any temps, whether it be from agencies or the Frito Lay temps that they had, we were about 125 people short in the plant overall to just run a decent capacity and minimize overtime to where it's what they would consider a healthy amount. But something that is happening now is people are on strike. They've got nothing but time. They're filling out applications and they're going to go somewhere else because they're going to be like, wow, I'm at Goodyear, or I'm at Smuckers, I'm at Mars. I don't have forced overtime. I'm getting my days off. Even if it's a minor pay cut, then the mental health, the trade-off is there. Seeing your family is there. The days off there, and you're like, wow, I have a life again. And you start to love the things that are around you instead of being this robot, being these motions.
Well, I've been there for 5 years, and just the decline in atmosphere is significant from when I started to where we're at today. The decline in morale, the decline in, your attitude when you walk through the door. You really feel as though management does not care. They run a skeleton crew and they do not decrease the workload, they increase it. Well, we're short-staffed. Well, we've been short-staffed for 6 months. When are we not going to be short-staffed? Now I have to come in and work like 3 people. Now you expect my crew to do areas with half the amount of people. You're not decreasing our workload. You're not increasing staff. You were well aware. Like when I go to management, I go to my lead. I go to my leads, our department resource. I go to the BUL, and then I go to the person above them.
The department manager.
Yes.
Yep.
Like how many people do I have to go to before we get change?
Before you're heard.
Before anything is done about any of the issues or problems specifically in sanitation's department alone.
And I think, my personal opinion, if Frito Lay in Topeka wants to have an adequate shot of getting staff and even change their reputation and perception in the community, I would say they have to eradicate forced overtime. That's the only way people are going to change and be like, okay, I can come in there. I can deal with a decent wage. It's okay. And now knowing there's no forced overtime, now knowing I'm going to get days off, that'll change how people look at our job and want to come in the door and want to have that better wage than what they might be getting at fast food. It's still not competitive with the places and other plants around here. But again, to change the perception of this community, I feel like they're going to have to eradicate forced overtime, because as long as that's there, as long as people know, hey, if you come here, you're going to be forced 7 days a week, 12-hour days, or whether it's even 7 days a week, 8-hour days. Those days off are imperative.
And that's a good segue, because I was going to ask, can you tell the audience what are your top line demands that you're striking for?
I would say we'd like overtime to be brought to only voluntary. You know what I mean?
Without doing away with plant seniority.
Right. Because something that could happen in the way the last contract was brought to us was, Pleasant's been there 5 years and I've been there 3. And if we're both in sanitation, if they force me in or over Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, let's say we have the same weekend, Saturday, Sundays off. Okay, well now I've hit what they were going to say is our max of 60-hour cap. Well, that sounds great. But then, okay, well, we still need these lines sanitated. Pleasant, you're the highest senior, although you've been here longer. Now we need you to come in. So if she's only worked her normal 8 hours Monday through Friday, well, now they're just forcing her for 12s on her days off. So she's still not getting days off. And then it's leaving it to where you almost want to have no seniority, or you're a high senior forcing yourself to sign voluntarily to make sure you get your days off. And it shouldn't be that way, because it's been based off seniority the whole time that plan's been out there. And it's not, no one wants to hear it when they come to the door. Well, you got to pay your dues. You got to work your 12s. You got to, get forced. That way you can get some seniority. People will come in under you, and then you won't get forced. But it's not like that now.
A better solution.
Right.
These are problems all across the board. The short staff, you're bringing temps in, and sometimes the temps don't care. It's not their plant.
Yep.
They're
taking hour breaks.
So you're also breathing a different atmosphere with trying to replace your essential core skilled workers with temps or temp bodies, and they come in, and sometimes they come in for a day and don't come back.
Or sometimes even 4
Sometimes-
hours. They'll leave at lunch. They'll be there. They're like, I'm not doing this.
Yes.
And they're gone. And we're like, where'd so-and-so go? You know, because someone was training them in a trailer or training them on setup. And they're like, well, they didn't come back
They
from
didn't come
lunch. And they're done. They're like, no, we're not. Like, they don't want to do this.
I mean, like, jobs have people like that, but to sit in an environment where you're seeing hundreds of these type of people while you're working your butt off, you know, come into the building while the needs from yourself are so high, but then you see them just floating by doing everything that they want to do. You know, it's kind of hard.
And
It's
that's
a
where the
revolving
toxic.
door for staff.
And they've held 3 different job fairs at the Topeka Workforce Center here in Topeka, Kansas on Topeka Boulevard. And they've been doing this for years. They've been using the Workforce Center as an attempt to try and get people in the door. But again, the perception is so bad that other businesses are also using it as a way to get people in. They're not going to the Frito Lay one. They're going to the Smuckers. They're going to Goodyear. They're going to Mars. They're going to U.S. Foods because they know if I go to Frito, I'm getting forced. I'm not getting days off. I'm not seeing my family.
And one thing about it is that like they've changed so many things
Yes.
just to open up the door to a bigger crowd of people coming in. When I first started, it was a hair follicle test. So, and then they changed it to a regular urine test.
You used to have to have a high school diploma or a GED. You don't have to now.
No.
It used to be you couldn't have family that worked there at all.
Yes.
You could not be related to anyone.
Now
Now,
families are on the same team.
yep. And so then it can. I know I won't say people's names, but I know that there's a person who's a first shift lead, and there's a person who's a second shift regular warehouser, and those two can overlap. You know, for potential 4 hours, whether it's in early. You know, for a second shifter and first shifter, and if that person's in the lead position that day, you know, if they're not, you know, switching with the other leads on where they are in the department, then they could very easily give their family, hey, why don't you just go sort cardboard? Or if their family member takes an hour lunch, well, there may not be a repercussion then. But if someone else were to do it, it's a write-up. Or they've got them in the hottest trailer possible that doesn't have a fan in there with no type of air circulation because they're not family. So there's a lot of things that have changed to where, you know, and like you said, it used to be really prestigious. It used to be out in the grocery store and you wear a Frito Lay shirt and people walk up to you like, wow, you work at Frito, like that's so great.
Yeah, how did you get that job?
And then-
now,
And it was something that was said with pride,
Yeah.
you know, and I feel like we all want to go back to that.
That, right. We want that.
We want to be proud of where we work. We want to say it with pride, and we want to be happy being there. And truthfully, honestly speaking, from my heart, if you treat people like you care and like they matter, then
They'll work
they
harder for
will.
you.
Yes, but in essence, the way that the workers are treated from one department
To
to
the
the
next.
next.
Every department has their own problem.
And it's tough because now,
You
like,
have to treat your employees better. You have to care about the people that are running your product and keeping your company afloat. And when you don't take care of them, that is why you get the staffing issues that you get. You're not addressing our needs from the company standpoint in whole.
And
You're
you
not
get-
addressing
you get a
your
position
workers' needs.
where I've been out, you know, fresh off a 12-hour shift. I gotta go to the grocery store, get a few things for, you know, meals, whether it's my daughter or my household, whatever. And instead of hearing, wow, you work at Frito Lay, you'll be grabbing a gallon of milk and something like, wow, you work for Frito Lay, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
That's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, after my, you know, 83rd day in a row and I'm fresh in my, you know, just soaked clothes of shut down or being an operator, or even if you're in the warehouse, you've been in 120-degree trailers. Yes, because that's what I want to hear at 7:30 a.m. while I'm just trying to get milk from my kid. I just want to be kicked down even more, knowing I got to go do the same thing again tonight because this is the monster that it is because they're not caring about us. So
It is sad.
it's almost degrading. In a way.
That it got to
this
this point.
Right.
Yes, none of us want to be on strike. None of us want to
Right.
be.
If they give us a fair contract, we'll come back in. by all means, we'll get these lines up. We'll clean these lines. We'll ship for them. Like that's never been an issue. We've never had a problem with coming to work. It's what we have to deal with at work. And I know during the time of COVID, this was also something that people hadn't had days off.
Mm-hmm.
The only way they would get days off is they would call in COVID leave.
Yeah.
Whether they had it or not, they would say, man, I haven't had a day off in a month and a half. I'm going to call in a COVID leave. So then they get those 10 days off and they're finally able to relax.
Because they're still getting paid. So.
Right. But then the problem would be people would abuse it. But then when they'd come back, the atmosphere around that person would be negative. People would have something to say.
Well, we were already short before the
right, and we were right, and that's what would cause that is we were still not getting days off.
Short staffed.
So there shouldn't have to be all these hoops to jump through just to get a day off, just to only have to work, 40 hours a week, and not be forced in or over. Like there shouldn't be all these hoops to jump through, like a circus, to finally say, okay, now I can take my girlfriend out to dinner. Okay, now I can get my daughter's ballet recital.
It's not just that. Also, it's management. Some of it is the way that the departments are being ran.
Yep.
The solutions that they bring to the table aren't for us.
It's for
We're
them.
not even
it works
thought of.
for management.
It
It's not
works for
us.
them or it works for pushing product out the door.
And I know to be a resource, you have to have a college degree in some position. It doesn't really matter what it is. But I'm a firm believer there's one thing that college doesn't teach you, and that's it's people skills. There's no book for that, and how to be a leader. You got to develop that. So when they're bringing these new resources in, and they're coming into the iron fist toxic management, they're just falling into that cycle because they're thinking, well, this is what we do here at Frito Lay's management. When in reality, it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be the way it is inside that building.
I'll say this. One of the reasons why I stayed at Frito when I first came is because I had a resource who was an older guy, and he worked at different plants, seemed to pick other plants. I don't want to say names. And he was a people's person. He would come out and make sure that his crew was made it to the day. Hey, good morning, good evening, how are you? Good to see you. Thank you for coming in. And I would like for Frito Lay resources to take that step and say, hey, my crew is here. I'm going to go out and make sure I acknowledge each and every one of them.
Good management matters.
Right.
It really does.
You'll be seen on the floor.
Yes.
They're not. They're in their cubicles and the AC, looking at computers. They're taking
or watching cameras because I've had a resource tell me I'd gone somewhere, come back, and I guess someone was trying to rat me out or something, and he said I can go check the cameras. I said, well, please go ahead and check.
Right.
Well, when it comes to Frito Lay standards, that's actually a threat because for anyone to look at the cameras to kind of discipline you, they have to go through the union. Right. So if it's a one-on-one kind of thing, someone can tell you some kind of off statement like that. Right. But the resources now that are coming out, it's like they're breeding a team of dictators and not leaders.
Yeah, the iron fist. Yeah.
The iron fist. It's Mayo, the hiding. We've had a couple of them who've kind of learned through the job and through the months how to be better, leaders and how to hold this, But it's always when there's a new resource, there's a bunch of write-ups about to just go out.
Right. Just know.
It is something that we all, especially the warehouse, is a new resource. Give them a month, 6 weeks.
Right.
After that, you have write-ups off the wall for any small thing. They don't talk to you. They don't know how to address you. It just becomes like a fight.
And
so you're always on guard.
Something that these resources are told is, well, that you come in on third. Well, hey, you want to get moved to first? Get some write-ups. Be part of that good old boy club. Be that company boy.
Yeah.
When instead they're just out to find something instead of how can I come into this building and make the department that I'm given a better environment with the 30, 35 people that I have under me. Instead, it's, well, I just don't want to be on third, so I'll just write a bunch of people up and then I'll get put on first. And then we're constantly having this revolving door of resources, or there's resources that they're like, I don't want to be involved in this, and they just quickly leave. So,
see, there's some that had actually made it into a game. They actually had a pool, gambling pool.
I heard about it.
Yeah, see, it started to finally get around about some of the stuff that was happening in the office, but they were betting on people who were going to get fired and how long some people were going to last. So that's definitely some of the stuff that we have gone through. That's how they look at us.
And that's why, like Pleasant said, like, we're a family. Something that they tell you in orientation, and it's something I vividly remember because it's turned into this, is they say, you're going to see the people at work more than you see your own family. And you kind of laugh about it at the time. You're like, yeah, right. And then it's like, wow, they were legitimately telling the truth about that. And not in the way of, like, I'm choosing to be here. It's I'm forced to be here. I'm forcing to see these people. Not that you don't want to see these people, because we have some great people out there. But it shouldn't be that way. The people you work with shouldn't almost be more of a family than your actual family within the confines of the roof of your home.
Let me ask you a final question. The governor of Kansas is a Democrat. The mayor of Topeka is a Democrat. Obviously, we have a Democratic president. Congress is in Democratic control. Obviously, they're not the ones forcing you to work like this, but they are the party that says they're for the people. Have you gotten any response from local Democratic leaders, national leaders, as far as what's going on there and offering to support you?
We did have Bernie Sanders tweeted out at us. I think it was last week. He said he stands with the people here, the People Lay Frito Lay strike, and said that what Frito Lay is doing is corrupt. Outside of that, whether it's local government, the governor, or the mayor, I have not seen any direct towards us, but I can say the community here in Topeka has been outstanding, right, in the area,
everywhere,
right, and it comes from other states. There's been donations. It's bringing food,
and the local unions as well.
Right, yeah.
The other day we had a woman actually call up Papa John's down here from Wisconsin to order us pizza.
Yeah. So as far as the political side of the Democratic Party, there's been some support. Like I said, Bernie Sanders, but I don't think anyone could specifically say, hey, our governor, our mayor is calling out Frito Lay themselves, or even presidential, as far as Biden, who's in the Oval Office, is saying, Frito Lay, what are you doing? I don't think anything like that has happened. Would we love that kind of support?
Yes.
100%. Would we love to continue to get it? Whether you're Democratic, Republican, Independent, whatever you are, we would love everyone, because I think everyone as a humanitarian to be on board with this, because everyone deserves time off and deserves to be with their family.
We did have one senator, Dana Sykes. She came out and she took time to ask us questions and what we would like, and what's actually going on. She brought some water and some just drinks, which was an ice, which was really amazing. So, and I don't know about the mayor and the governor speaking up on our behalf. I do know they see this in the news every day.
Yes.
But I'll be honest, I just haven't felt that love from them.
And we'd love to have them to strike.
Yeah,
like,
I'm hoping they can.
questions.
Yeah, I'm hoping they can actually speak up on our behalf. Not really speak up, but they can say something, because this is something that's affecting the whole community right now. The past week, we haven't had any chips out. There's been no hot Cheetos out. There's no Lays out in the stores. And Frito Lay is basically putting little stickers out saying our people are on strike. So, I'm sure this is affecting people to where, I know everyone has to shop at one point. You do see the shelves are empty. I'm hoping they may address this as an issue, because it affects the whole community.
And I know Frito Lay said that, like, one of their goals through the strike was they're just going to starve us out. They're going to make it to where we have to come back because we can't feed our families. We can't pay our bills. But that's just not okay. Like, why not give us a fair contract? Because right now they're spending all this money with a temp agency, their rental cars, their food allowance, the buses for transportation. Like, they're spending all this money, private security,
on every shift.
Yeah. Instead of doing all that, give the people that got you through the pandemic the raise. make us feel valuable. And, I'm not saying that money's the only way, but I'm telling
Give us
you.
better working conditions and environment.
And not even that, we worked through the pandemic and all we got was a t-shirt and a meal. I'm sorry, those don't cut it no more. We can feed ourselves. I mean,
Right. That's
clearly,
what our paycheck is
everyone
for.
out here is looking healthy. What we do want is better work conditions, better benefits.
Yeah.
I don't see why it's such a big deal when we made this company billions last year.
Right. And they
We're
continue
not-
to make
yeah.
money.
And
So
we continue.
it's a never dying industry. People are always going to be chips.
And everybody knows that, though. Everybody knows how much they made last year, but the processing side actually didn't get a bonus because we didn't meet the company needs in 2020.
But did upper management get
They're bonus.
they
You
did.
can almost-
Sure did.
It's
Yeah,
almost
right.
like when the pandemic hit, any type of incentive or reward for us was just cut off.
It was like a split
We got a
management.
20 extra dollars.
Dollars on paycheck in a 6-month period.
It was a day.
Was it
was
$6?
I believe
It was $20 a day for a couple of weeks.
Oh, I
Yes.
didn't know.
Yes.
Yeah,
And then
you're right.
after that, they cut it off. But I guess the
Right.
over-the-road truckers were getting $100 a day.
Right. And since then, now the over-the-road truckers have went from making a guaranteed $750 a week to now $1,300 a week. So they also have got a raise, and we can't get more than just crumbs as a raise. I was told at one time that after a resource had been there, I think it was either 9 months or a year, they got a $10,000 sign-on bonus if they made it that long. So, it's tough to see the office personnel get their weekends, be in the AC, work from home, get their bonuses, but then we're just treated so poorly on the other side of it.
And one thing is when they get those bonuses from our sweat, our blood, our tears. I'm going to say that. So the harder they work us, the harder the more the results, good results,
The more
the more
expect.
bonuses they make.
Yeah.
Because
So
I
the
know
resources, the upper management, they make the bonuses. We don't.
regardless, right?
I believe it should be a fair deal. I mean, it's not in vain. And I can be honest right now, if you ask someone even the lady who's probably doing the negotiating, if you ask her what goes into a sun chip, what goes into a cheetah, she probably doesn't even know. But she'll sit there and want to argue that she's going to give us $1 more per hour.
Yeah.
And you're going to give me 10 cents. But if I ask you to go back to sun chips, if I ask you to go back to baked and fried,
Right. Start a lineup.
start a lineup, or how hard does it get back there?
That's about how
Or how high does a fry need to be for you to run chips? You probably wouldn't tell me, but you don't want to give me that grace. But you expect me to start this lineup.
From our local news agency, I believe it was an interview with Capital Journal, and you can find the article CJ online. It might have been WIBW, it was one of those two. But it said a spokeswoman for Frito Lay openly came out and said, it's not that we can't afford to give them a good, fair, and appropriate wage. It's that it's our job to protect stockholders' investments. That's just criminal to me.
Yeah.
That's just corrupt because, like you said, we're making them billions of dollars, and we can't get $2-3 because there's people who haven't had a raise in 6-10 years. The cost of living goes up.
I believe the sanitation department has had maybe a 37-cent raise in the last 10 years.
Cost of living goes up. Prices
Everything
of chips
goes
up. But they're looking at us and saying, "You're fine. You're all right.
And then you're
Make it work."
As just a
in
number.
retrospect and hindsight, when you're treated like you are just a number and you are very replaceable, like your knowledge, your skills, and your experience and time spent there is for
It's
nothing.
next to nothing.
Yes.
And
And then
they
you're
can't get
placed-
people in. So
And then you're
treat it
placed
with
in a
that.
toxic work environment and
Because you come in feeling like you're not worthy, and you walk in that door and be like, "Man, I'm just, I just could be gone tonight. They could just fire me."
you know, there are hazards, different hazards all the way across the board. But for my department, I've always been sanitation. Now, you're also dealing with understaffing at its finest,
But it's fine.
And then you're dealing with training issues. And let's speak about the training issues. You know, for our department, you're supposed to have a minimum of 3 times in an area to be trained before you're cut loose. Well, due to staffing issues and company needs, this person may have only been trained in this area one time and then, oh, well, we're short and there's nothing we can do about it, so we're going to throw this guy in.
Yeah, or on the pick belt, you're
And it
supposed
doesn't
to
matter
get
what we as trainers say.
right.
And that breeds a dangerous environment, and an environment for people to get hurt, to not make it home to their families, or to end up in the hospital.
And I know on the pick belt, when you're trained to pick, you get 1 week of training with what we don't have certified trainers in the warehouse, which is something that we would like. Is if you're in the warehouse to get trainer pay like every other department gets. So you're supposed to be with someone for 5 days straight, not broken up, 5 days straight, and then you're supposed to have 4 weeks on the pick belt by yourself to what we call ramp up, to where you're supposed to hit what they expect is called score. On the pick belt, they want you throwing 4,500 cases a night. And
Well, they decreased the wage over there and increased the score.
increase the score, right? So that belt, and when you pick, it's a big S curve, and then you walk it one way, and then you walk the other side of it. And they're wanting you to throw 4,500 cases a night. Those 83 days off that I didn't have a day off that I talked about, I picked every single night, and they wanted me consistently to throw them 4,500. You're just burnt out, you're spent, and you're gassed, and they're expecting you to come in and hit that. And then when they're training people, there are people that'll get maybe those 3 out of the 5 days, and they'll have them up there a week and a half, and then they'll take them off the belt. They won't get their ramp up period. Or you have people that'll go up there and they intentionally won't try because then management will favor them. And I've had guys openly say, "You're like, I just don't hit score. That way they won't put me back up there." And it's just, there's a lot of favoritism. They give them these easy outs instead of holding the accountability where it should be in some areas. But like she said, they decrease the wage, but then they're expecting more out of you every single night.
Thank you guys so much for taking the time. Honestly, it's unreal. This is happening in the wealthiest country on earth, but it continues a trend, frankly, a 40-year trend of plutocrats exploiting workers, killing workers, frankly, and then cashing it to the bank. So we'll continue covering this at some point. If it continues, I might even come out there to cover it.
We'll love to have you.
Yeah,
Love
absolutely.
that. Yes. Thank
And
you very much.
thank you guys very much for sharing your story.
All right.
Thank you. You have a good day, sir.